All right, so we're diving into the Gurgaon real estate market today. And honestly, the stuff you sent over, it's pretty fascinating. We're going to try and pick out what's really, truly going to matter to you, whether you're actually thinking about making a move, putting some money into property there, or just trying to, wrap your head around what's happening in this area.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. We've got everything from, why those builder floors are suddenly so hot. I'm seeing them everywhere online
Yeah.
to, trying to peek into the crystal ball and figure out what 2025 might hold for the market. And even like zooming into these specific little pockets, the micro markets that are really seeing some action. Not to mention like, what investors are up to, the real world headaches of actually buying and selling there.
Hmm.
Because it ain't always pretty.
Uh,
And some of the stuff that, frankly, Gurgaon needs to get better at. And then I guess, like, a little bit of a what's next, what the future could hold kind of thing.
Perfect. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about these builder floors. I've seen them popping up all over YouTube and Instagram, especially in those DLF phases like 1 through 4 and Sushant Lok. What's driving all this buzz? They're beautiful, obviously, but there's got to be more to it, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think it's more than just like the aesthetics. I mean, those builder floors are definitely eye-catching. All those customized interiors you see online, it's like, wow, I want that. But I think it speaks to like a deeper shift in what people want in terms
Hmm.
of living spaces. It's almost this like hybrid model where you get that sort of individual home feel, but often within a gated community. So you get
Yeah.
that security and those amenities, but it's not a high-rise apartment.
Yeah, totally. It's like finding that sweet spot, right? A little bit of independence, a little bit of community, and definitely a whole lot of style from what I've seen. But the
Mm.
material you sent does mention that, when it comes to just pure numbers, the appreciation in value, it's not usually as high for these builder floors, especially when you compare them to high rises. So what's the catch?
Yeah, no, you definitely bring up a valid point. You're not going to see those same kind of like crazy spikes in value that you might with some of the like high-rise developments. But I think with these builder floors, it's about like a different set of benefits. The information we have suggests that there's still a really strong choice if what you're after is that extra space, having a place that really feels like your own visually and all, and staying well connected to Delhi. And you throw in a well-maintained gated community with stuff like security and power backup, which, let's be honest, are lifesavers in Gurgaon. That adds a whole other layer of appeal. So it's like, are you in it for the biggest, fastest financial return, or are you factoring in the quality of life stuff?
Right. Makes sense. So big picture now, the market in Gurgaon, it's seen some serious growth over the last 3 years, that's clear. But there's also this like murmur about a market correction coming up heading into 2025. Can you break that down for us? What does that even mean for, regular people?
Okay, so think about it this way. That crazy growth spurt, it can't go on forever, right? It's just not sustainable. So this idea of a market correction, what it basically means is that things are going to start to level out a bit. We might see those double-digit returns, the ones that make everyone's eyes light up. They might become a little less common. Single-digit appreciation, that might be the new normal. And honestly, that might not be a bad thing. It usually means things are getting a little more predictable, a little less like a roller coaster ride.
Okay, so a bit more like a steady climb than a rocket launch.
Yeah.
Makes sense. The information we've got also mentions that developers are starting to like adjust. They're launching new projects, but the prices are a bit more, down to earth. And investors are being a bit more cautious too. What's the takeaway there?
Well, to me, that kind of suggests the market is like self-correcting in a way.
Right.
You've got developers adjusting their pricing and investors not jumping in quite as quickly.
Yeah.
And those two things together, I think they point to a market that's becoming a little bit more, I guess you could say, rational. And that's actually a good thing. It helps to prevent those like crazy speculative bubbles and sets the stage for, longer term sustainable growth, which is what we all want.
Right. Makes sense. Now, what about for people like us, regular people who are actually looking to buy a place to live in? What does all this mean for us? The material mentions that ready to move in properties are still in high demand and they're likely to keep appreciating in value because there's just isn't an endless supply of them. Is that good news for buyers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, at the end of the day, people need places to live, right?
Yeah.
That fundamental need isn't going anywhere. So when you've got strong demand for homes that are ready to go and, the supply isn't infinite, those properties are probably going to hold their value pretty well. And there's a good chance they'll keep appreciating over time. So, it makes home ownership a little less risky, a little bit more stable, which is reassuring if you're thinking about buying. So let's get specific. If someone's thinking about like long-term growth potential in Gurgaon, Where should they be looking? The information we have highlights Extension Road and Southern Peripheral Road, or SPR, as people call it as, like the hot spots. What makes those areas stand out? Well, a few things, really. The main things that stand out are connectivity. They've got good access to other parts of Gurgaon, and also their location. They're close to those established areas like Golf Course Road that already have a lot going on. Plus, you've got a lot of big, reputable developers launching projects there. And those are all signs that an area is, on the upswing.
And there's a bit more detail in the material about Extension Road specifically. It seems like a good option for those mid-segment buyers, but finding anything under 1 crore rupees, that's tough, right? But you can find some decent-sized 3 BHKs in that 1.5 to 2.5 crore range, even in some of the older, more established communities. What's the key takeaway there?
I think the takeaway is that, Extension Road, it's not necessarily the cheapest entry point, but it offers good value for your money in terms of the type of property you can get. And especially if you're looking at some of those older, well-maintained neighborhoods, you're often getting a lot of space and quality for that price range. So it's about understanding the current market reality in that specific area, and figuring out if that aligns with your budget and your needs.
Okay, and what about the Dwarka Expressway and New Gurgaon? We see those names thrown around a lot. There's obviously potential there, but the information also mentions that things like schools and hospitals, that whole social infrastructure, it's still under development. How do you weigh those pros and cons?
That's a really good point. You've got this potential for growth, right? But then you also have to factor in like the practicalities of daily life. If you're moving to a place where those essential services aren't fully up and running yet, it could be a bit of a challenge, at least for a while. So I think those areas are probably more appealing to people who are thinking long term, people who are willing to like ride out that development phase and know that, down the line, things are going to be even better.
So let's switch gears a bit and talk about investor strategies. One of the things that really jumps out from the material you sent is the shift towards a more like personalized approach in real estate. It's not just about like chasing the next quick deal anymore.
Right. And I think that's a really positive development, honestly. Buying property or investing in it, it's a big decision for most people, right? It's not something you do every day. So this move towards like a more relationship-based approach where real estate professionals are really taking the time to understand their clients' long-term goals, to show them properties that actually fit those goals. It just builds trust, and it leads to stronger, longer-lasting relationships, which is ultimately better for everyone involved.
And speaking of investors, the information also points to this growing interest in assets that offer like a steady stream of income. Things like individual buildings that you can rent out, builder floors that can be rented out, even commercial spaces that offer those upfront returns like 4 to 6% with the potential to hit 9 to 10% over the long term. It seems like investors are looking beyond just like flipping properties for a quick profit.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting a bit more savvy, diversifying their approach. They want that immediate cash flow, that sense of security, and they're also betting on the property, appreciating in value over time. And in a market where those like really fast resale profits might be a little less certain, having that steady income stream, it's definitely attractive.
We talk about the potential, the excitement of the Gurgaon real estate market, but the material you sent also doesn't shy away from the challenges, the stuff that, most people don't really see. Just the logistics of it all, scheduling viewings, coordinating with all the different parties involved in a deal, dealing with tenant schedules. It sounds like a bit of a headache.
Oh yeah, it can definitely be a juggling act. I mean, just getting everyone together for a single property viewing. You've got the seller, maybe tenants if the property is rented, family members, and then, of course, the potential buyer. Just aligning everyone's schedules can be a nightmare. And then you throw in Gurgaon's traffic, which is, legendary. The fact that public transport isn't always the most reliable. And then things like monsoon season when those roads can get flooded. Well, suddenly just showing someone a property becomes a major operation, especially if they've only got a limited amount of time to look around.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And speaking of challenges, we can't ignore the areas where Gurgaon itself needs to step up its game. The material points to things like the public transportation system, which, let's be honest, could be better. Then there's the strain on the drainage systems, especially during those monsoons, leading to all that flooding. And then there's the elephant in the room, the pollution from things like stubble burning and construction dust, which is a serious health concern.
Those are all valid points. I mean, a good public transportation system, that would take a lot of pressure off the roads, right? And a better drainage system, well, that would make life a whole lot easier for everyone, especially during monsoon season. And the pollution, that's something we just can't ignore. It affects everyone's health and quality of life. Addressing those issues, that's crucial for Gurgaon's future, especially as the city continues to grow.
And there's this interesting idea in the material, this call for more community-driven initiatives, things like, local air quality monitoring, really emphasizing wellness and health alongside those fancy amenities in residential complexes. It's like a shift in mindset,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It's like, realizing that having a swimming pool and a gym in your building, that's great, but what about the air you're breathing outside? What about like the overall well-being of the community? Taking ownership of those broader issues, working together to improve things, I think that's where the real change happens.
So looking ahead, what's the outlook for Gurgaon real estate, both for the market itself and for the people working in it? The information you shared talks about this idea of sustainable growth. What does that look like in practice?
Well, I think sustainable growth, it basically means taking a more responsible, long-term approach.
Right.
It's about building real expertise, providing consistent value to clients, and creating a more stable market. Instead of just chasing those quick, flashy wins that might not last, it's about thinking about the bigger picture, the long-term health of the market.
And while there is some talk about exploring those, second home markets like Goa, it seems like the main focus is still on Gurgaon's core micro markets, on leveraging that deep expertise that's already there. Why that continued focus?
It probably comes down to, like, playing to your strengths, right? You've got these professionals who've built their careers, their networks, their knowledge base in Gurgaon. They understand the nuances of those specific markets. So while venturing into new territories can be tempting, there's a lot to be said for sticking to what you know best,
Yeah.
for really focusing on those areas where you can provide the most value.
And it seems like the overall strategy is one of, slow and steady wins the race, really emphasizing that in-depth knowledge, that consistent value delivery to clients. It's a more measured approach, but it feels like a more solid one, both for the market and for the people working in it.
Exactly. It's about building trust, building a reputation for solid performance, for really understanding the market and putting your clients' needs first. And that takes time. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's about building something sustainable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Gurgaon real estate, based on everything you've shared, I think the main message here is that whether you're buying a home or investing, you really need to be aware of the current market situation and how things might change going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, this market adjustment that we're talking about, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a natural evolution.
Hmm.
And it's important to remember that each type of property, whether it's a builder floor, a place in a gated community, a high-rise apartment, they all come with their own pros and cons.
Mhm.
So your choice really depends on your own individual needs, what you're hoping to get out of the property, and your long-term financial goals.
And the last thing I'll say is that, finding the right real estate professional to work with, that's absolutely crucial. Someone who's honest, knowledgeable, and actually cares about building a relationship with you, not just closing a deal. The material really emphasizes that. It's like finding the right partner is just as important as understanding the market itself.
Couldn't agree more. A good real estate professional, they can be your guide, your advocate. They can help you make sense of all the complexities, all the moving parts, and make sure you're making a decision that's right for you, for your specific situation. That's invaluable.
So, to leave you with something to think about, based on everything we've discussed today, how might this shift towards sustainable growth, this focus on community well-being, how might that influence your own thinking about buying or investing in Gurgaon? It's definitely something to consider as you, make your decisions.
Absolutely.
All right, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
See you then.